everyone. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton, creator of FMTraining.tv, where I've been getting over this really gnarly head cold. So today is another awesome day. We have a lot of great content. Before I start that, this is a free live stream. However, if you'd like to know what other free live streams are coming up, this is one of those less exciting displays I have. We have today, we have tomorrow, and then there's a lot of vacation, but we put those in there so people know. So we'll be back. We'll be off until January 3rd of next year. Awesome, very exciting. If you want to support the channel, because Garrett doesn't work for free and we have to pay everyone's salaries, we encourage you to visit fmtrain.tv. Once again, the left button is the live tab to show you the upcoming schedule. Purchase one of the bundles, really helps us. Anyway, so that's how you support that. So today's conversation is about the loop script steps. So let me close this. I want to welcome Garrett Debsky here. He's one of our super duper senior engineers. Fantastic guy. He almost, you like one live stream a year, maybe, Garrett, if you're
maybe
busy. Maybe.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time you were here. So Garrett's here because Nick is nicking. This is kind of I can present the material, but I brought Garrett in case I need backup. It's like 1 out of 12. We got a 211. Shots fired. We need backup. So if you guys start flicking bullets at me, I'm going to duck. And then I'm going to have Garrett stand up and go, excuse me, while I answer the question. So yeah, I don't think that'll happen, but it might. Also, I'm getting over my cold. So if I suddenly go hoarse, I can't talk anymore. Garrett will have to take over. Claris continues to add performance in terms of all sorts of things. But what Claris likes to do is they try to automate as much as they can so you don't have to think about it or do too much with it. The good side is that if they can do it intelligently, that helps everyone. If they do it dumb, then that's good for the brand new people, but it pisses off the professional developers. A lot of you here are professional developers. So when I've been talking to Claris about like, hey, we need this AI stuff, there's like these conversations that go on between what do end users want to see and what do professional developers want to see, and they're very cognizant of all that. So they've said that they're working on that. I assume they're working on that, but I'm just telling you, my job is to advocate for the intermediate people out there. A lot of you here are intermediate. You've been doing FileMaker a long time, but you didn't turn it into a full-time permanent career like Garrett does. And so you're stuck in this area between maybe intermediate and senior, and you vacillate in there. So anyway, Claris wants to automate as much as they can, but they have to give us hooks, control sometimes to decide where we want to take advantage of the horsepower. And sometimes Claris realizes they can't do that themselves. So that's kind of what today's conversation is about. So terminology, caching. Caching is this idea that I'll show you a picture. This is the definition of caching, but the idea is that when you shoot data through the network, and I'm going to click the button right here again. Oh, I'm in the way. So this is the idea of what data is. So as you're interacting between your client and your server, data is going across your network, the internet, whatever. The farther you are away from the server, the slower this will be. The more data you push back and forth, the slower it will be. So two things are good. One, the server as close as possible. So you want a data center, like an Amazon data center that's in the same part of the continent you are, would be great. And you also want to minimize the amount of traffic going back and forth. So if you cache the data is local on your end, and you're not necessarily shooting it through the network, which makes it go much faster. That's really a big deal. So click, there we go. So the FileMaker database engine in 2023, that's technically correct, in 2023, does more caching of relationships and evaluating dependencies. It does it without your intervention. However, one thing that they turned on is this idea is the looping script step. And so the looping script step is one where it's always had a cache setting. In fact, everything that FileMaker does has a cache setting, and they mostly handle it for us. But here they turned it on, they made it visible. And so the settings are basically behave the way it's always behaved and or behave in different ways, which we're going to discuss. And it's really trying to understand where you use these, right? And so once again, I've talked to some folks at Claris about this, and this is kind of where we're at with this conversation. So the three settings are, so we'll start with the first setting. So always is the default setting. So for those of you who asked a question, I have, if you go into a loop in 20.3, next to the loop, and then you have in loop at the bottom, next to the loop, it'll say, a pop-up will come up, it'll say always minimal and defer. Always is the default. If you work on a solution in older versions of FileMaker, that pop-up's not there, but understand that it was always. Okay, I just butchered that on purpose, but that setting is historically, even though you can't see it, is always set for always. so the idea is that what happens is if you make an edit to a relationship, data through a relationship, and I'm going to show some charts and graphs, well, not charts, but some diagrams here of this. If you edit data through a relationship, as soon as that's done, then FileMaker, the client, updates the server. It doesn't update the cache. It certainly pushes it to the server reevaluates, you reevaluate it. Anyone who might have that data gets updated by the server at that time. All that can cause a slowdown in a lot of different areas. And so that's the default behavior of FileMaker. Loops, if you hear Nick talk about loops, and I totally agree, loops are an abomination, and that's because they're so slow. Well, with this, it's going to give you the possibilities of making it go faster. So every time that you run a script step, you modify some related data, the data is going to get flushed back to the server, pushed up the server through the network. The relationships will be reevaluated. The little connections, the little bridges in the relationship will be, evaluated. Also, what's on the display, it will be updated, possibly updated, depending if you have the freeze window thing enabled, etc. So we're clear on this one. So this is the default behavior, right? Garrett, you want to add anything to this?
Nope, it's the default behavior. It's what it's been, and it is the default going forward. That's what's going to be set unless you change it.
Yeah. So the behavior could be the same from FileMaker 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever. It'll be the same unless you monkey with this setting. Okay. I'm going to hit the next slide here. So this is always. So I move always up. So this is defer. So always, it's always blowing out the cache, not really using cache data. Defer is the opposite, the total opposite. So when the loop starts, the client will simply be working with the cache relationships and the cache data at the client level, wherever that client's at. Okay, and I say the word client here very specifically. The client will wait until the loop completes. Then once it's complete, it pushes the data back to the server and all the dependencies are updated. During the loop process, layouts won't be updated. Now, most time you don't want the layouts to be updated anyway, but like the other day with Big Valley Aviation, I had a loop that was running and I would update on the screen. It was processing images and it was so slow that I was doing this one. You have 10 images to do, 1 of 10, then it would say 2 of 10. So I'm updating the window, the layout, so people can see the progress. So if you go down this road, you're going to kind of probably lose access to that. So this can be the fastest option because it's not going to talk to server too much. The client is going to do its own thing. Okay.
Yep.
Right. We're good, Garrett. Feel free to interrupt.
Yep. No, it's just, if you think about the video you showed before, it's just, this is looping through, doing all its work in the client. And then at the end, it's shoving all the changes up to the server.
And then the server is going to distribute that data to other people that need it.
Correct.
Right? So, yeah. So, next slide. So this is, so if we have always, we have defer, they're like opposites. Then this is like in the middle. This is the middle setting. And then, so this is for, and it's easier with the next slide when we talk about the graphic, kind of diagram this out, because it's a lot of text and me waving my hands, which is helpful. But minimal is when you're looping through a loop. You're I'm going to use the word cycling. So loop is the overall thing. A iteration of the loop, I'm going to call it a cycle of the loop. And that's where what the issue becomes fundamentally, if you're doing a loop and the data that you're addressing in each looping pass doesn't have any effect on any other data that might come up in the loop, then you never have a problem. Okay, it's this concept that if your loop is going to cycle 10 times and you're on cycle number 2 and you've got 8 more to go and you change some bit of data, you change a relationship, you change a key, you change a summary data, and somehow in your loop you're addressing that area of data elsewhere, then you could potentially an early cycle could affect a later cycle, right? It's nothing that we've ever worried about because FileMaker would always make sure everything was up to date. But let me go to this next graphic here. This will help. Let me jump forward here. This right here. This is what I want to get to. So this is the loop. Okay. I want to get everyone on board with this. A loop runs in a context. The context is always a layout. A layout is always attached to a TO, right? Everyone good with that? Yep. Margaret, if we have questions, please yell. Okay. So then I'm going to move myself into a very small, non-important hiding person down here in the corner. And so here's what we're going to see. I'm going to hit the next slide. So the loop, a script runs in context. Now, in the case of this, we're going to assume that the context never really moves. You can have a loop or a script that jumps all over the place, but during the loop, for simplicity here, it's going to be attached to a layout. A layout's attached to a TO. It's TO6 documents. Okay, so the issue becomes is what are you doing? So as this thing, and I'm moving my mouse around, so hopefully all of you can see this, as this loop is cycling, it's in here. And if I tell it to set data over here, the question is, if I set data in cycle number 2, will that somehow affect cycle number 3 or 4? For example, a great example, then I'm going to tee this up, Garrett, and then I'm going to want you to expand upon this, is in Big Valley Aviation, sometimes we decide that there's a found set of records. We want to move those. They're like a child record set. Doesn't matter what it is. It's parts for a helicopter. We're going to do an oil change on a helicopter. It's called a 100-hour inspection. Oil change in a helicopter. I have a canned set of parts, and I want to duplicate those parts and attach them to a new work order. So we already know that it needs 5 different filters, right? You're like, well, my car is an oil filter. Okay, we got 5 oil filters on the helicopter, at least on the simple helicopter. So we need all 5 of those plus a bunch of seals. So it's a list of like 20 items that are the consumables we need for the oil change. So in one area we have like, here's the official list. And then here's this helicopter, specific helicopter. It came in Thursday, want to get out the door. Take those 5 items. In fact, Margaret's supposed to be working on this. And they take those 5 items, duplicate them, and move them from one parent record to another parent record. So say this loop is doing this, right? The loop is doing this. And the loop says in here, first, before the loop, it says find the parts for this oil change. Got it. Now loop through, duplicate the record, change the foreign key on the other side. So when I'm reattaching records, I don't do it through a portal. I actually would go to like a parts table, parts area, and do it there, right? But the idea is that I don't do it through a portal. So I would actually say on here, duplicate the record, set the foreign key to this other work order for this part. So it's oil filter, like a legit oil filter. Looks like even oil filters, the number 1 of the 5. And you're like, okay, duplicate it, got it, and then reattach it to this new job that we're doing, this oil change. And so, but what you end up doing is you end up affecting that item. You're moving its relationship, and then if you also want to mark it as it's available, or we picked it off the wall, or we did something like that, right? What it is that you moved it, and then after you moved it, you made an edit to it potentially through that relationship. And that's kind of this issue. Gary, you want to dive into this a little bit? I don't know if I slaughtered that too badly, but it's the idea that an early cycle of the loop could affect other things. And if that's the case, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's really 3 different things you have to think about when trying to pick always, minimal, defer. It's one, what is the context? So are you only editing things in that documents table? Like if we're looking at this graphic here, are you only editing things in the first table? If you are, then potentially you can use defer. If you're editing things that are 1 hop away, as we referred to it on the previous slide, 1 hop away. So we're modifying the document record and we're setting a counter in the contacts table that, we have another document attached maybe in the loop. So we're 1 hop away. We can't use defer because defer is only for the table that we're on. So we need to at least use minimal because that's 1 hop away. If you're going more than one hop away, so we want to go down all the way over there to the second work orders over there. If you're going all the way over there, you have to use always still, because that's the criteria that it's set on those for always. It has to be 2 hops away. The other thing I think about is, once again, getting back to the layout. Do you need the layout to refresh or not? So where are your edits happening? What related data do you need to modify? And then what do you need to show on screen for the user are kind of the 3 things that you need to evaluate.
Yeah, that's correct. And so I'm kind of jumping around here. So the idea is that, let's just start with the outside pieces once again. So always means that as soon as you edit the data, it pushes it all back to the server, which means that if you have if you're going to do any work in that loop spot, in that spot in the loop, or in a following cycle that depends upon what you just did, that's what you want to use, right? But if you're just doing, if each loop cycle has no impact upon other loop cycles, right, in terms of what you're touching, then just defer it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the in between is this idea, once again, that is that the loop cycles might interact with each other, but you're only doing stuff from a parent to a child, 1 hop, right? One relationship, 1 hop away. And so that's that minimum middle of the road setting. Once again, I wouldn't do any of these unless someone's complaining to you that the performance is slow. So yeah, so that's the issue with this. So it's got, basically default behavior, where it should always push it to the server, defer, which it doesn't do any of it. So defer is really like a transaction, right? So this gets back to this idea that Claris has been playing with, this idea of transactions and building them in. You start a script, you do a bunch of stuff, you don't push it back to the server until the transaction's over. So defer causes your loop to kind of be transaction-y, okay? But if you have dependencies from one loop cycle to the next loop cycle, and there's like a relationship has to, like if you change the foreign key at one point in cycle 2, and then for some reason in cycle 3 or 4, you're going to go through that specific relationship with that changed relationship. If you haven't flushed it and reevaluate to the server, when you run that later on, you're going to still be attached to the wrong record. It's kind of, yeah. So you could actually change a foreign key, commit that, right? Commit it in the script step, and then assume it's working in a loop later on in a different loop, and it's connected to the wrong record, right? Garrett, you want to expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, it doesn't see it because it hasn't been pushed to the server yet. This is one of those topics that it's great. It's really exciting because it's really boring, right? FileMaker did the auto magic for us mostly, and it's giving us tools to do things that we've wanted to do forever, but it is kind of a boring topic because it really is pretty simple once you understand 1 hop, 2 hop, loop, not loop.
Well, it's not even that you're just editing the data there. Is there a dependency on that change you've made, right? I mean, will it affect anything you're doing before you get to the end loop? And if it doesn't, then just blow it, get it done as fast as you can, then push the whole mess back to server.
Push the whole mess, yep. And I think going forward, defer will become something I use quite a bit, just because of how I program, I think. But like Richard said, if no one's complaining about your code, don't go backwards and start modifying a bunch of stuff just so you can. You'll break something. I'm sure there's going to be little gotchas that we'll run into with this stuff, but in general, all the caching stuff that FileMaker is doing, Claris is doing, for all these different script steps is great. I've seen a lot of speed improvements for some customers that have had, a lot speed issues with certain features just by updating to 2023. So that's been pretty promising.
So Larry asked the question about implications for nested loops, right? So there's all sorts of like, what if you mix this with other things? What if you mix it with a transaction? What if you mix it with more than one nested loop inside? So I don't know what the permutations are for this. I would be very careful. Listen, if you have a script that works, I would be very careful about turning this on unless people are really unhappy and then you had to rewrite it. So whenever I have to, this goes back to performance improvements that Nick has talked about, or we've talked about in general, but PSOS, right? If I had a script in that Big Valley Aviation project that the user would press to insert a portal row in between other portal rows. And it took it 11 seconds on a client to do that. And what I ended up doing is I went, oh, it worked. And the customer had it for a day. And they were like, oh, this is too slow. This is not acceptable. And I already kind of knew that because I knew anytime you press a button, you wait 11 seconds. Not a report, but like a day, you might press it 20 times in a day. That's just not acceptable. I PSOSed it, so I have PSOS run it for me. It came down to 1.5 seconds, which is for these guys plenty fast enough. So this is in your bag of tricks for making stuff go faster. So if I would PSOS something first, because I think that's your biggest dramatic improvement by far. Is PSOS first. Then if PSOS is still not getting you everywhere you want to go, and you have a big loop in there that's loopering, there's a new word for you, loopering away, then you need to think about, well, if I turn on defer, what does that do? And you want to validate that because we always make assumptions that if we set a field and we commit it, that is locked in and it's real. And with this, you could change a key, but then the following loops would not see that change. It wouldn't be saved. The following loops wouldn't see it at all. It's almost like each loop iteration is its own transaction. That's a hairy thought. Does that even make sense? If you change
loop one has no idea what loop two, or I guess the other way. Loop two has no idea what happened. Loop 1, 3, 2, like they're all independent.
But the running assumption is that they always would be up to date. But with defer turned on, not only are the loops independent, but the loop cannot assume that the data it sees is accurate. The data would be accurate as of the time when the whole loop started on the first cycle beginning. So really the loops are almost transactional inside themselves in nature. I just had that thought on live TV. Does that sound right to you, Gabe? That sounds almost right, doesn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
So we have transactional cycling is what we have. Okay. I hurt my head. All right, I hurt my own head. Now what?
Can someone over PSOS?
Can someone
you can run PSOS so much that your server slows down, right? But then get a bigger server. I don't know what to say. Because basically PSOS means that your server is running a FileMaker Pro script for you, more or less, and the data is local to it, and there's no network traffic. The only network traffic, so understand, it says like this, like collateral consequence. John Thatcher at Claris taught me this years ago. There's this side effect. So if you have a PSOS script that's just going 9,000 miles an hour and it's updating a bunch of records, and you have 100 users logged into the system, every time that PSOS loop or whatever it's doing hits a record and edits it, separate from PSOS, the FileMaker server engine goes, hey, I've got record number 48135, has an ID number. 48135 has been changed by PSOS. Cool. Saved it to the drive, the disk, good. Now, the FileMaker server goes, which of the clients out there is looking at 48135? Oh, 8 of them. And it has to send that update out to all of them in real time. So if your loop is going on the PSOS, the server engine itself is sending out updates like push notifications to the clients. Hey, this changed. Hey, this changed. Hey, this changed. Really, 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 really fast. And that's a performance hit on the server from that. And the only way around that is to like do it when not everyone's there, or do it transactionally. So the PSOS does one big transaction when it's done, because say you edit, PSOS does a loop and it edits the same record 5 times. bang, 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 bang. Every time that loop finishes with always, the server engine is going to distribute that out. So it would have distributed that record of data 5 times. But if you transact the whole thing or run this defer, either one, then the FileMaker server is not going to share the information with everyone else until it's done. Then it's going to send out one push for that one record.
Yep.
That's a big concept too. Garrett gets it.
Yeah, PSOS is still a client, so it handles it. Server handles it just like a client, right? So
yeah, it's a separate process. It's basically a headless copy of Pro.
right.
All right, so Schmiegel's got up thumbs and new verb PSOS it. Oh, absolutely. PSOS, yeah. Anytime that I get desperate, something's going slow, and I'm not being blatantly stupid in my coding, then I try to do PSOS. Save my with Big Valley. Big Valley's been an interesting project because I hadn't really done a big project in a long time, and it went back and rediscovered all the stupid that the platform still does, and it went back to the product manager and say, "Hey, I quit complaining about this stuff like 30 years ago, but these items are still
there.
Stupid." Like, for example, someone can record lock and just walk off. All right, so any questions about this? This is not that horribly complicated. So anyway, yeah, so tomorrow's conversation, we're going to be done early today. It's obviously done and everyone's bored with the conversation. Tomorrow is going to be on HEIC, HEIF, and the fact that Windows by default doesn't like those formats. And FileMaker doesn't tell you this. It just draws this kung fu corrupted graphic thing on Windows when you run into it. And so we're going to talk through that. Oh, yeah. So we're going to talk through that conversation tomorrow because that's the default image that you can take and shoot for the last couple of years with the iPhones, right? And what Claris tries to do largely is tries to convert them to PNGs in flight when you're going to like load them or something. But we've run into a couple bugs where they get through. And then you have to use monkey bread to read it and convert it. So once again, Christian Schmidt to the rescue again. Every time something unsavory happens in the FileMaker, the Claris platform, Christian Schmidt is like, the old American, the West, it's riding over the hill on his horse with a sword, riding to the rescue. Him and his one dude and one horse and one sword. But it's a powerful sword. It has 7,243
He's riding a
22
monkey.
features. Yeah, well, he's got a monkey on the sword. So whatever. But yeah, it's 7,224 features, I think. All right, guys, that's it for today. I appreciate it. I'm going to call it good. Stop sharing my screen. I'm just actually going to hit the button for closing. Thanks, Garrett. I'll see you around.
See ya.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir!